I'm here with Dr. Mike Israetel, muscle building expert? Expert on many things.
That's
today,
definitely not true.
I am challenging you. You've been defiant of the youth community for a long time. Youth pop culture. So today, I'm taking you through a tier list. I'm going to shoot off 20 exercises at you.
Okay.
And I'm going to have you rank them from S tier to D tier.
D tier.
D tier. D tier is terrible.
B
and tier is good.
Average. In this
B is
case.
average.
Okay.
A is slightly above average. S is the best.
Yeah.
And D tier is awful.
Okay.
I'm going to break it down by body part. So we'll start with the chest.
Okay.
First off, the barbell bench press. What tier and why?
This is from a hypertrophy standpoint.
Right.
No one cares about anything else.
True.
Obviously. I would say the barbell bench press is an A tier exercise. It loads the pecs the biggest in the movement when they're at the most stretched, which is very good. It allows for a good range of motion. It allows for a free motion, so you can alter the exercise to your specifications, needs, and preferences based on bar path and positioning and where you put it on your chest. Like some chest machines just don't fit right, and that's not a problem with the barbell bench press. It accommodates a wide variety of repetition ranges. It's relatively safe, especially if you have a spotter. It's not at face value very injurious acutely. It can be if you don't warm up and do sets of 3, but sets of 5 to 10 and especially 10 to 15 and more reps seem to be really good. It's also great because it has built-in variation through hand positioning. So you can do closer grip, medium grip, wider grip. There's lots of variation there built in. It's kind of cool when one exercise has a bunch of different sub-exercises inside of it. And for many of those reasons, I would say it's an A tier. The reason it doesn't get S tier is because the bar stops you from getting really, truly deep in stretch for your pecs. So I would reserve that for another exercise.
First exercise already paid off by a big stretch. We're starting off things beautifully.
And big 1RM, which is a huge lobby.
That's true. All right, exercise number 2 for the chest, the cable crossover.
C tier, because the crossing over part is just highly unconvincing from the literature and definitely from my own personal experience that from here to here does anything marginally more useful than from here to here. Maybe there's some kind of stuff with the inner fibers. I'm not going to be unscientific and say definitely not. But because of that crossover insistence, and we are saying crossover, not saying the cable fly, that emphasis on the crossover is going to take some of the energy you could have used for more stretch mediated, or that's no longer the technical term, for more lengthened hypertrophy, lengthened bias hypertrophy, and you're kind of using up that energy at the contraction. Not a huge fan of that. So the raw stimulus magnitude is just not going to be unreal. People do a set of bench press, they get off and they're, holy shit, my pecs. Rarely do they do a set of cable crossovers. They go, holy shit. They either do a bunch of those sets. Usually it's the end of workout. Another thing is it's a little confusing how you're supposed to go. Do you go the same way for a while, then the other set for a while?
We're dancing right now.
Yeah, well, you were saying you don't even want me to get a pop and the boys out here. But it's, from that perspective, not inconvenient, but kind of like, which one is it? And it does require a full cable station to pull off in most cases, which in a gym is sometimes tough. Like real world gym, like, man, you'd be lucky to have a quarter of a cable station to yourself. But the full crossover rack, man, forget about it unless you live super early or super mid-afternoon. So for that reason, I'd say C tier probably. There's definitely a discussion for B tier of like, it's decent. And it is decent, but it's decent, but I would almost never select it. So to me, that's C tier.
Sure. Compared to alternatives, there's just better exercises out.
Almost always.
C for crossover.
That's right.
All right, next, the incline barbell bench press.
The incline barbell bench press, I would have to rank as A tier again. It has all the benefits of the barbell bench press. It even has the benefit of preferentially stimulating the clavicular fibers. Though if you take a proper arch and a retraction, it actually has a really good effect on whole pec hypertrophy. And it's adjustable to position. It's adjustable to the individual. It has no problems that machines have where they have high friction. So the eccentric is less and the concentric is a lot more. It's kind of the reverse of what you'd want. It's just an amazing exercise. The reason, I guess, so maybe 2 reasons why. One reason for sure why it's not S tier, and that's the same as for the bench. It's limiting on the range of motion. And the other one is, and I'm only like paying a little lip service to this. I don't really mean it so much, but Some people don't like barbell movements. They fuck with their shoulders, their elbows. Now, I think most of those people are just doing them wrong or haven't given enough time to learn how to do them right. But it's just not something that agrees with everyone. There's not an exercise that agrees with everyone, so there really is no good way to answer that. But just to make sure people listening have recognized, like, not all S-tier exercises or A-tier will be great for you, but they could be good places to start to see how it goes.
Incline barbell bench press or flat barbell bench press? You know what? We have to decide between the two.
I'd say incline, mostly because most people that use the bench press want that upper shelf look. Yeah. And don't want like the are you a mother who is currently feeding children look. And so that's why a low incline or typical incline barbell bench press with a good arch retraction turns into a great pec builder overall that biases the upper pecs. To me, that sounds like what most people want from their pecs.
Great answer. Next one. People like Menno Henselmans have said this might not be the best chest exercise, but what do you think about dips for the chest? What tier?
Dips for the chest, if you have regular non-converging dip bars, are probably C tier, only because they often preferentially fatigue the triceps, and you'll get a pec stimulus, but the pecs are unlikely to be the limiting factor. If you have an angled dip station, especially with a pretty wide angle, and this is sort of cheating the system, but if you have a friend hold your legs, your feet back behind you, it turns into A to S tier exercise for chest. But so lots of differences, there are lots of caveats there. So I guess on average, I would say dips for chest are C tier or B tier, because it's just not at face value a chest exercise you would use. But if you widen your grip successfully, tilted over really far, especially if you had your friend hold your feet so you can kind of lie over it, then it's a huge deficit push-up, and then you're in business. Then it's a great exercise.
Since we're on the topic, deficit push-ups, what tier?
I mean, outside of people that are so strong that they can no longer make any use of them, which is rare, especially if you use them in a superset after a bunch of chest or tricep work, most people can do them just fine. Outside of that group, it's an S-tier exercise. Minimum warm-up, minimum setup, body weight, minimum equipment, some blocks or something. It gets you a huge stretch at the bottom. Also, because as you come up, you get more perpendicular to gravity, it actually loads you more at the bottom than at the top. It is kind of an emphasized length and contraction. And because you have a deficit, it's really a length and contraction. So for me, checking all those boxes, that's S tier. That's goated status. That's...
Bussin'.
That's for real. Bussin'. God tier. God tier is above S tier?
It's just another time used for S tier.
I gotcha.
Bro, this video is me teaching you a lesson.
Yes, on video game rankings.
There we go. All right, next, moving on to arms. First, the barbell curl.
C tier.
Damn.
Yeah. I put on a lot of size doing barbell curls. There's something Christian about the movement. Just a hard-working man in the fields doing barbell curls, earning a goddamn honest reputation. The science fanciness. So it's great. Now, why is it B tier? One is, as I learned from you, it emphasizes the force exactly the opposite of where you want it. It's hardest at the top. It should be hardest at the bottom for maximum growth. The barbell curl, as opposed to the easy bar curl, isn't friendly to a lot of people's either wrists or elbows or shoulders, whichever one you want to take the debit card to. It checks out of the other account. And for that reason, another reason, this is a very small reason, but doesn't apply to all people. The bar is 45 pounds. A lot of females, like, it's too much for curling properly. And so even if you do it right, it might just be like, well, I have to use 20-pound bar, and then where the hell is that? So for those reasons, I would say that the barbell curl, even though it's soulful, is a good place in my heart. Yeah, it's a C tier exercise.
Not to mention that for you, loading up 315 takes a while, you feel me?
Well, that's why I only do it once, and then I do a set of 50 with full ROM, and that's it.
Beautiful. All right. Next up, we have the dumbbell kickback for the triceps.
I mean, hate. D tier. F tier.
It's so over.
An NPC character didn't load. Like, if it just didn't occur in the game, that'd be great. It's the opposite force curve of what you want.
Is it the worst tricep exercise?
I don't have an instant catalog in my brain of best to worst, but it's sure shit in the conversation. Like, if you were at the club and you're like, look at that girl, and you're like, ugh, and someone's like, is that the ugliest person you've ever seen? You're like, other than myself. I don't know, but they're in the conversation for sure. The kickback part, so you do this, highest force is at the top, 0 force at the bottom. So we can comfortably say that there is no force imposed at the stretch. That's bad news. Me personally, I've actually had some elbow issues even trying it, which is like, how do you get that small of raw stimulus and elbow issues? There's a lot of whole body stabilization that has to occur. Technically speaking, your delt and much of your back musculature has to be in a partial isometric contraction the entire time.
Dude, muscle length isometric as well.
The best. Just pure fatigue, nothing else. So for those reasons, it's just not the worst, but damn, it's up there. The other thing I'll say, two saving graces for it is it's not a fake exercise like Bosu ball squats. Don't make a tier list because they're stupid. It's an exercise. It's real. You can use it. And also its injury probability is quite low. So if you ask me maybe later for back, like rack pulls, I'd say that's D or F tier because it's simultaneously not so stimulative, but also likely to have a higher probability of injuring you. Absolutely, that probability is really low. Relatively, it's much higher. At least nobody's getting hurt on a tricep kickback except me. But that all being said, at the end of the day, it's like someone's telling you, like, hey, you should date Nancy. And you're like, what are her downsides? And they're like, oh, she doesn't have a lot of downsides. You're like, what are her upsides? Like, she doesn't have a lot of upsides. And you're like, all right. So the dumbbell kickback, none of some downsides, but just, man, you're going to have to do so many sets to get the same stimulus. Whereas if you flip over and you do a dumbbell skull crusher, off the same bench, I might add, with the same equipment and load, you're just going to get a better stimulus.
Next up, the cable overhead extension. Last exercise for the arms.
I really like the cable overhead extension. If you do it and set it up in a decent way, usually you end up having the highest forces at the bottom and the lowest forces at the top, just goes due to mechanics. It's an opportunity to do overhead extensions in a way that really you can kind of really get into the technique, really bring your elbows in, spend a second or two at the bottom pausing. And I think it's an amazing exercise. I would say it's A tier or S tier, something like that. It's also super awesome to superset with things. So you do a bunch of those and you get right into close grip push-ups right after. You literally just rack it and you just drop down. Awesome, super easy, super convenient. I haven't done them since I've become a known person in the world because my traps and shoulders and back and biceps have gotten so big for my frame. There's nothing back there that exists anymore. So people will say, like, why do you love this exercise, but you never do it? I'm physically incapable of doing it. But back when I used to do it, it was like a religious experience. I loved easy overhead extensions, barbell overhead, not as good as easy, but easy overhead extensions and cable overhead extensions are just money. While I'm at it, something useful for the folks watching, don't use the fucking rope. The rope ends up having you spend a lot of energy locking out and spreading it open at the top. And that's not very stimulative for growth. And because you have to, let's say, get 15 reps, in order for you to get 15 reps and waste this much energy at the top, you have to reduce your load. So by logical necessity, the load absolutely at the bottom is lower than it would have been if you just used an easy bar and just fucking cranked them out. So I would just say don't do rope extensions as a matter of principle, unless, as always, you go in and your stimulus and fatigue proxies tell you this is an unreal exercise. If you do rope extensions, your triceps crazy, swollen with blood. You're sore for 3 days. You do them again later. Again, the same thing happens. Rock on. But it's unlikely. Stick to the bars attachments, stick to bar attachments. I would say the rope is a cool attachment, maybe for face pulls and stuff. But for push downs and overhead extensions, I hate the rope.
S tier. Busting for real. Cable overhead extensions. Yep. Next up, we have the shoulders. The standing barbell overhead press.
So for manhood, God tier.
S tier.
For sure.
You already used the tongue. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I learn. Slowly, but I learn. For shoulders, as people colloquially understand the term to mean, the shoulder press overhead is a D tier exercise.
God damn.
Yeah. Why? One, it is not colloquially understanding of what the shoulders are always and ever means side delts. When your side delts are really big, you look more like Jared Feather. And then people go, what the hell is wrong with you? Your rear delts and front delts get so much work from pushing and pulling that even if you put many exercises into front and rear delts, it would not make a huge difference in your delt appearance, definitely not on your overall body appearance. Side delts are what people really mean when they say delt training. To that end, the overhead barbell the overhead barbell press takes the side delts biomechanically at first principles, diagrammatical biomechanics, where you just look at a diagram for a second and go, what does this mean? Just on that perspective, it doesn't hardly recruit the side delts at all to do the shoulder press. Surprise, it's a pushing exercise. It's mostly front delts. Put them in a deeply stretched position, the whole 9 yards. Does it recruit some side delt? Yes. But what's the cost? Insane axial fatigue. Your spine will get loaded standing and fucking pressing a bar. I get quad cramps, ab cramps, lower back cramps all at the same time, because when you try and you have to stabilize, shit gets really wild. The systemic fatigue is really high. It's a whole body movement. It's these huge levels of fatigue. And what can we say about it? The level of stimulus to the side delts, which is our target, by the way. He's like, oh yeah, I think so. You know, people don't do overhead presses and get like huge pump side delts. It just doesn't happen. It's a fine tricep exercise, believe it or not. It's a very good overhead exercise for the front delts. But there you have to contend with the fatigue as well. So say if you're going to do shoulder presses, do them seated. Standing is just insanely fatiguing. So do them seated if you're going to do them. But if you're going to do them, understand that almost everywhere and almost always, presses for shoulders are targeting the front delts and the triceps. The side delts and the traps get minimal work, and thus to me, it's just not a shoulder exercise. It's called a shoulder press because your shoulders are involved, and we've just kept that term for a long time.
All right, let's talk rear delts real quick. Machine rear delt fly.
As far as rear delt exercises are concerned, B tier, because it's like grandma. She was never special. She had breakfast for grandpa done on time every time, and the sex existed. That's all he ever needed. Same idea. You do this, you feel some shit, and that's that. Because I think most people should not be training their rear delts, because if you do proper full range of motion back work, you have very high rear delt development.
High fractional volume, essentially.
High fractional. What I would say is this, rear delts to me probably can occupy a very decent fraction in most pulling movements because they are a prime mover. They really are. I mean, they do this, the fuck you do it in a row. They do this in a lat pull down too. Yep. So you're training your rear delts all the goddamn time, and then you decide the 3 sets of sitting down in a fucking dildo machine doing this is going to get you huge rear delts. It's not maybe a drop in the ocean, maybe it'll help a little bit, but there are better exercises. So I'd say B tier, it's fine, but nah.
Cool. Final shoulder exercise. Arnold did them. Barbell front raises.
Yeah. So if you do barbell front raises with a prone grip and you pull in such a way that doesn't pull thumbs up, it pulls pinkies up especially, you get quite a bit of side delt activity. And it's a decent side delt exercise. Minimal tension at the length and position, so it's not ideal. Easy to just get carried away and swinging it, but if you do good technique, that riding it down through that tough part, putting it back up, riding it down, can be really intense. So I would say it ranks probably as a B tier exercise. If I have to do it, I'm not mad at it. I still do it on occasion in my rotation of exercises because you don't want to have 3 shoulder exercises you always do. You run out of shit. But it makes the rotation. It's not amazing, but it's not the worst thing in the world. If you have dumbbell front raises, or you do front raises with a plate and you point your thumbs up like most people do them, then it's almost exclusively a front delt exercise and not a very good one at that either. If you want a good front delt exercise, you take your thumbs up dumbbells, put them like this, get a nice really low incline, touch the shits to the ground, come up, touch the shits to the ground, maximum stretch, tension under length and position. It's amazing. But it's not sexy, so nobody's going to do it.
Would you do those? Like,
would I
do direct front delt training?
Me, never. Absolutely not. Well, I was a very good overhead presser before, so my front delts are already kind of wacky, and I get so much out of my pressing movements that I just straight up don't need front delt work. All I need is like side delt, side delt, side delt, side delt. I've never met anyone who I thought was definitely... So first of all, lagging front delts are insanely rare. I've also never met anyone who I thought like, man, if this guy's side delts get bigger, he's just going to look stupid. Like, that's really rare. And to most people... Of all the volume literature we've been discussing, you and I, in our little friendly relationship for the past several years, we say, 20 sets is a lot of sets per week. And realistically, in a whole body program, it's tough to do 60 sets of back or legs. Nobody's really doing in the real world 52 sets of quads in any number of weeks training in a organized program. I don't mean nobody. Facetiously, of course, someone is, but very few people. With side delts, they don't systemically fatigue you much or cardiovascularly. You can take short rest breaks, accumulate insane volumes, insane proximities to failure. There's lots of variation. They don't irritate your joints much if you use reasonable poundages. And they aren't positioned, the side delts, in a way that makes them really easy to stretch, which means they don't take on a ton of damage per unit volume, which means that your maximum recoverable volume on side delts, often in the real world, really is like 40 sets per week. And so I think a lot of people could do way more side delt work and just ditch the front delt work and rear delt work altogether and have just cooler physiques.
I can see that. I think the fractional volume you get from compound movements for the side delts is relatively low.
Very low.
So
because when do you ever do this? Right. But this you do all the time.
Correct. Cool. Let's move on to the back. The barbell bent over row.
I would say it's A tier, especially if you do it the more advanced way. So I'm a big fan of learning strict barbell rows first. Nothing moves but your arms and your shoulder girdle. The advanced way is to start an ultra deep stretch, but then as you come up, not with momentum, not swinging, just leverage your hips up higher. So you're moving your spine with respect to your hips. And then as you come up, you're going to touch. That's going to reduce how much force is required to touch your tummy to count it as a real rep, because you're at a mechanical major advantage. And then as you bend over to get the next rep, you become more mechanically disadvantaged. Thus, the tension imposed at the lengthened position is wild. But you say, well, I can't come up now. Well, that's okay. As you row up, you kind of come back up. So it looks like this. At the bottom position, here's your head, here's your hips. At the bottom position, it's this. At the top, it's this. That style of bent row, which many people athletically feel out anyway for egotistical reasons eventually, except they do it in an uncontrolled manner. I think it's great because it's not a very good lat exercise. But some people have this thing, and I've been chatting about this a few times before. They see lats and they see back, and to them it's like the same thing, but it's not. There's a shitload of your back that has nothing to do with your lats. So as far as an exercise for the rhomboids, mid-back, every part of your trapezius muscle, the entire spinal erector complex, and decent for lats and teres major, the barbell bent row just crushes all of that out pretty goddamn well. Some of it really, really well. And it's going to give you a whole back pump, which feels really sweet. You're like, oh my God. Like, which part of your back do you feel? I like asking people that question facetiously after they do rows. Like, I don't know, man, kind of the whole thing. As far as a one-stop shop for a fucking jacked back, especially if you do it advanced style and really lean into the length and stuff, it's a fucking great exercise. It's not A tier because you could have a better accommodating resistance, challenging you more at the stretch and less at the contraction. It's that A tier because it has a high systemic effect there with, like bending over fucking sucks. Yep. Breathing heavy. It's making you tired for legs later on. Yeah, oh, yes.
Bending over.
Lube. No lube.
Tired for legs later.
The gym. The lights are dark. Yeah. So kind of taken together, I would say it's probably kind of a B tier, A tier because of that ability to hit your whole fucking back.
Solid take. Next up, we have the machine row. Let's talk about the prime machine row, in fact.
The prime machine row is goated.
God tier.
God tier. And because it does that thing I was talking about, first of all, it has a chest support, which is a negative if you want good spinal erector development. But there are other exercises you can take care of that. I think so.
Flex and extend your spine.
You can, but that doesn't hit all of the spinal erectors because some of the ones go super low, and they only if you bend your lower back with respect to your hips do they get hit. You can't do that on the machine because the chest plate stops you. You actually, to your point, Milo, unless you put the chest plate to like your dick, you can't get a length and contraction out of that. Whereas in a cable flexion row, oh my God, like that whole thing goes. So while that part is missing, everything else is just checked off like crazy. Again, it's not a great lat exercises because all rows stop here, but the lats stretch to here. So overall back though, holy fuck. It's there, as Jared would say, there's only one way to load that exercise, even though there's 3 pins, there should just be one. It's the top pin that lets you feel crazy stretch tension at the bottom. You've used the machine. And at the top, you're just like, oh, that's nice. A little break. You get to feel that little crunch and then settle back in and really ride that eccentric down. And it's a machine that's a lever machine. It's got 1 pin in it. It doesn't generate any meaningful friction, so it doesn't suffer from the friction part of machines. And so it checks a ton of boxes. Also, the prime row specifically has handles that rotate every conceivable direction. So you're like, it doesn't matter how you like to do this. You're going to like it.
2 more for back. The pull-up.
The pull-up is A tier. It reliably makes my lats sore like almost nothing else, if not nothing else. The eccentric ride from here all the way down to here is just really, really stimulative. There are many different grips and positions you can do, so you're never run out of fun. It doesn't have a frictional component. So lat pull downs, you have to pull hard on the way down, on the way up, it's not that great. For pull-ups, it's the same both ways. And just on raw stimulus magnitude, it's just baller as fuck. It also provides you with almost no axial fatigue because it stretches the spine. And thus, you can do a lot of pull-ups on multiple sets. You don't get tired in the same way that if you do a lot of rows, even machine rows. And for those reasons, I think pull-ups are pretty fucking good. They would be better if you could somehow make them heavier at the bottom and easier at the top. They could be better if they involved the mid-back and all the spinal erectors as well as the lats and the teres major, the vertical pulling musculature. But for the vertical pulling musculature, pull-ups are tough to beat.
Final back exercise. You mentioned tension and stretch. What about the dumbbell pullover?
I think the dumbbell pullover, if you work out your technique for yourself personally in such a way that you can really feel your lats instead of just your chest, because some people it's just a chest exercise and they're like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this. All right. Chest and long head of the tricep. But some people that get a really good lat pump out of it, good mind muscle connection. For them, maximum tension to stretch for dumbbell pullover. I can't do them because I would choke myself to death. But they're awesome, and I'm really jealous I can't do them. I would also recommend easy bar pullovers for people that maybe don't have that kind of mobility. And I do lat prayers, which are cable versions of the same exercise, and I love them. The force curve is unbeatable. And sometimes you're just tired of pulling stuff, and you need maybe a little bit more work on your back that you don't want to fucking toast your arms. And then that's a great exercise. It's also an awesome exercise to hypertrophy the long head of the triceps, believe it or not, because it's very active in that movement.
What tier?
Oh, fuck.
People are waiting.
Shit. Oh, the tiers again. I would say it's S tier. Yeah.
Respect. Awesome. Finally, legs.
Oh, shit.
First, the deadlift.
Yeah. For hypertrophy, it's D tier for sure. Crazy systemic fatigue. Crazy psychological fatigue, because just deadlift, it's war. Crazy axial fatigue is the definition of axial fatigue. Like, how can I take my spine? I go, and it has another huge problem where it doesn't actually, one of the ways that I've tried to get people talking informally in the fitness industry with regards to science is we're in a conversation for a good exercise if the target muscle is the limiting factor. Deadlifts do you one better than that. Because they're like, what is our target muscle? And you're like, I don't know. Is it the glutes? Is it the hands? No, sort of not really. Is it the spinal erectors? Maybe. Is it the rhomboids? Is it the lats? Kind of rear delts? What is it? Traps? Sure, yeah, but not really. It's isometric. It's an exercise that is a strength assistance movement from weightlifting sport. And it's an amazing exercise if you were to be a grown-up man. It's the ultimate manhood test. Go pick that heavy thing up. I can't. You need to deadlift more. But as far as hypertrophy for the lower body or even the upper body, the deadlift has a decent raw stimulus magnitude. Like, it will hit your glutes, especially if it's deficit deadlift. But it comes at such a huge cost, fatigue, acute injury risk, not clear which muscle is even the target. You'll find out what the target is after deadlifting for a while. For me, it's the spinal erectors. And it's a great exercise to build a spinal erectors, but at its fatigue cost, there are like 8 other exercises that build them roughly the same, but with fractions of the fatigue cost. Jefferson curls, flexion rows, things like that. So a lot of times in hypertrophy, you got to be able to say, like, what muscle, 1 or 2, is this really training? If you can't answer that question, you have a fucking problem. And with deadlifts, you can't answer that question. You add the fatigue element on top, the acute injury risk element on top, the huge lengths of time to warm up and break down, and you're on a totally different fucking planet here. I'm not going to mention the fact that a lot of people hate deadlifting because it feels tough. I think that's as many people as hate that, and I would have to acquiesce to them. There's people that find it manhood and raw and fucking violent, and they love doing it, so it kind of cancels out. I also don't like to rate exercises based on how fun they are to do. I think, at least from my perspective, I can do better as a sports scientist by telling people, here's what works well. Pick whatever you think of that category that works pretty well, that is fun, and you're good to go. Because I could say the deadlifts are like awful, and they are. But I could say they're fucking awesome, and they are. But as far as technical exercises for lower body or upper body hypertrophy, the deadlift is the very, very bottom of a very long pile of not so great exercises. And that doesn't mean it's a bad exercise, just for specific hypertrophy application.
Plus, enjoyment is subjective regardless. So even if you think it's baller,
somebody else might not.
Right.
100%.
Next, the hip thrust.
The hip thrust to me is probably like a B tier. It gets its B tier status because it's one of the only true isolation movements or close for the glutes. It can be something you get technically very good at and can really fire upper glutes really well. And it offers a huge reprieve from having to use your knees and your hips at the same time for most glute training. And so for those reasons, it notches up. It has the reverse of the force curve you want. It's hardest on the top, easiest at the bottom, which is bad news. And because most people do it with 2 legs at the same time, you can't even stretch that one glute nearly as much as you could with lunges or something. So because of those reasons, it takes a hit. If you have one of those Brett Contreras hip thrust machines, it goes back up. If you have a gym with a bench press, dildo to cover the bar and a barbell, it drops to Z tier because I'm not putting 6 plates on that fucking thing.
That's why I stopped doing them back in the day.
How many plates did you get up to?
When I was 19 years old, I hip thrusted 700 pounds for a rep.
Yeah.
And then my walking sets were around like 600 pounds.
Yeah. Jared has the same story. It's like 585. He did it for us like a set of 20, and he was like, the fuck am I doing here? I went up to 225, and I'm like, no, I'm done. So set up, tear down, all that whole thing for an exercise that has relatively low raw stimulus max. And where's the exercise? How does it earn its B status? What's an example of a B or an even A version of this exercise? You get the Brett Contreras glute thrust machine, and you do it for high reps at the end of a workout that already toasted your glutes, and you do multiple Maya rep style sets. You'll cook something. You'll get your glutes. And it's not systemically super fatiguing, and it's not axially loading. So that's pretty sweet. When your next alternative is like deficit sumo deadlift, the hip thrust starts to look pretty nice because it's not super high stimulus, but it's also pretty low fatigue. So stimulus to fatigue ratio is reasonable. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it fucks. So I would say B tier, depending on my mood, C or A tier.
Beautiful. Next up, second to last exercise, the leg extension.
Overall, I would say it's a C tier exercise. In the context of an otherwise integrated whole body or lower body hypertrophy program that includes lunges and squats and hacks and leg presses, things like that, it's an A tier exercise. If you can push the seat back really far and lean the seat back a lot, then it's A tier. But in the context of how most people use it, which is to say, like, oh, what should I do for quads today? Leg extensions. First of all, you're missing a huge fraction of the quads. Second of all, if you're seated upright like this in a leg extension that typically doesn't go down very low, there's a theoretical exercise we can talk about, and there's a practical, real ones that exist in the world. You get very little quad stretch in most leg extensions. It's mostly from here to here, and then down here, the plate kicks in, and you're like, clink, clink, I can't go any lower. So that sucks. Because of that, it's not going to stimulate your sartorius, your adductors, your glutes. So like if you just did leg presses, you would stimulate all that shit for the roughly same amount of time that you would be on leg extensions, stimulating like this, and sort of a little bit of this, but maybe not even. So that's why I would say C tier and the way most people use it. So if someone's like, man, I really want bigger legs, And I'm like, oh, cool, what do you do? They're like, most of the leg extensions. I'm like, get out of my face. But if they're like, hey, like I do leg extensions kind of in the middle of my quad workout and sandwich in with 2 presses, what do you think? I'm like, oh, I think that's great. Then I say, can you lean back on that machine? Can you push your knees really far forward, way ahead of the line of pull, and maybe put some pads underneath to get a crazy deep stretch? They're like, yeah. Well, then it's fucking S tier exercise. But it's going to take a lot of upgrades to go to S tier, and it's not how most people use them. Because if I just standalone said it was S tier, people would start using it more. Yep. And they'd be like, why was Dr. Mike lied to me? This isn't S tier. And I'm like, in the context of a lot of other shit's S tier. Yeah.
I mean, that plays well with our recent study on leg extension, where just extending your hips from 90 degrees to 40 degrees increased rectus femoris growth quite substantially, like plus 50 to 170% growth.
That's a big deal.
That's a lot of extra hypertrophy. Final exercise, keeping the worst for last, and the one exercise no one cares about, the seated calf raise.
The seated calf raise doesn't get to make any tiers. It's like, if you have a high school graduation, some of the people didn't do so well, still graduated. Some of the people are valedictorians. The seated calf raise didn't graduate high school. As a matter of fact, I think it's illiterate. It preferentially, by putting into insufficiency your gastrocs, which are the cool diamond-shaped shits, it preferentially targets the deep soleus muscle. That muscle is relatively resistant to hypertrophy, not resistant in the technical sense. It's less prone to be hypertrophic because it's composed of a higher, notably, as unlike most muscles in the human body, notably higher percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers. Evolution designed the soleus muscle to let you walk all day long without having a calf cramp and falling the fuck down. It's a walking muscle. And if you get a bigger soleus, it just kind of looks like you have more cankles than anything else. It's not the diamond shape you want on stage. It's not the diamond shape that girls at the club will grab onto your calves. That's what happens with calves.
That's what happens in clubs, right?
That's it.
Model experience.
I thought that's what happened.
That's what happened.
There are no calf raise machines seated in the club, I'll tell you that much. No way. And because it is seated, it offers an additional thing other than taking your gastrocs into insufficiency, which sucks. It also allows for people to pile on every plate in the gym and do this shit. And it's one of those special things in life that gives you the illusion of feeling like it's exactly the thing that targets the thing, but it's not. It's like telling someone who's asking directions for how to go to the beach, you go, yeah, it's that way. But actually the city's that way. For a while, as they're driving, they're still excited to go to the beach. Just like you're excited doing 600 pounds on the fucking seated calf raise, whereas nothing much of value is happening to your calves. Now, is it true that you could get some soleus hypertrophy from that? Yes. Is it a fine way to hypertrophy the soleus? Sure. But for how much time you're using, you can simply stand up, grab a dumbbell, go on a staircase, come one step off, halfway of your foot off, and do alternate dumbbell calf raises. You get all the soleus stimulus and the gastroc stimulus, and you don't have to pile 80 fucking pounds on the bar, and it takes the same length of time. So to me, when you have 50 different exercises with a straight leg that beat the exercise with a bent leg, it's one of those things where if I inherited a gym, which I did recently for my long-lost trillionaire uncle that just unfortunately was...
How many uncles?
Many. Few will understand that.
Few.
If I got in a gym and inherited it and there was a seated calf raise, I would just make arrangements to have it donated somewhere or thrown out. Instantly. It's not like, how can I use this? Don't care.
D tier.
D, E, F, whatever. Z tier.
Tiers are.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Mike, where can people find you?
RP Store.
In his house.
Yeah. Find me at my house. RP Strength on YouTube, and you'll see my face. Click on things, click around, and we'll get you in the funnel and get money out of you somehow. Wait, did I say that out loud? Hey. But seriously, dude, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Peace.